We are now joined by Ingrid Mason, metadata nerd and tech head, Jason ENSOR, data stylist, and Liz Stokes rejoins us, our carpentries champion. Ingrid, Jason, and Liz are here to roll out the welcome mat and invite us to join the regional chapter of AI4LAM, so AI for Libraries, Archives and Museums, a grassroots initiative that aims to pull together people passionate about digital cultural heritage collections and digital humanities research with interest in data, technology and computation. That sounds like everyone here. Go Glamours. Here we go. Thanks, Ingrid, Jason and Liz.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Kia ora, everyone, especially to friends and colleagues in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Yuma. I'm Ingrid. I'm beaming in today from Ngunnawal land. I'm in Canberra, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Thank you so much for coming to this session, either coming in late in the day or making it through the whole day. Well done. So Jason and Liz and I are going to try and get that mat right out to you wherever you are. And I'm just going to start the ball rolling, and then I'm going to throw it across the window to Jason, and off we go. So I just wanted to start the picture with a nice view over Cape Ringa in Aotearoa, so you kind of understand where we're going and what we're doing. So AI4LAM is pretty new as a community. It started off through a collaboration between the Norway National Library and Stanford Library. It became a community pretty much in 2019. And this chapter formed last year. We're an interesting and mixed bunch, a bit of a lean towards Australia in terms of numbers of people who have joined, and plenty of people from across the Tasman in New Zealand. We have our own channel in the AI4LAM Slack workspace, and we cover most of the sectors that you might think about when you think about artificial intelligence and libraries, archives and museums, or we call it glamour. But one of the things that's really clear is that we need more people that are either technologists or tech enthusiasts or tech curious in amongst and in the discussion, and that's why the mat is rolled out for you. We have a charter that pretty much says that we care about culture, ethics, literacy, and the role of AI in our society. And we really want many faces and many voices and many areas of expertise kind of brought together in that task. So we've got a focus for our chapter on showcasing projects. We've got a series of talks up and running, and we're really interested in building up capability. And there's a link there to our next webinar, which is a great set of talks organised to talk about how we trust machine learning. So I'm now going to be quiet, and I'm going to chuck the ball over to Jason. Jason.
Thank you, Ingrid, and hello. I'm Jason, and I work at a academic library with a wonderful team that look after the back-end digital infrastructure. Myself, coming originally from digital humanities, I would echo Ingrid's invitation and encourage anyone who's interested in the impact of AI in the Australian and New Zealand GLAM sector to join us and participate in our seminars and discussions. Something we are cultivating in our chapter is that any engagement with AI requires a critical stance and a healthy skepticism, the so-called sniff test, as it were, towards AI's utility and appropriateness, whether it is to be deployed as a tool or a prosthetic, and that such an approach is necessarily interdisciplinary. I'll explain this a little bit further. In my early years, I was fond of applying visualization techniques to big data in book history. As the years passed, I tempered my enthusiasm for digital humanities with a strident call to critically understand the mechanisms of computation and codification that underpinned any digital technique used in humanities research. Drawing on a review of my own work in this area, which relied on scripts I wrote and data I scraped, I argued that we needed to pay careful attention to the various ways data was collected and organized, and to be alert to how different visualization techniques can impress upon an audience different orders of meaning when data is graphically represented. We needed that is, to take account of the selection bias at both data classification and data analysis, and how each is a constructed object. This is because technologies of data visualization and the performative politics that surrounds their use are not neutral. And I felt then, as I do now, that clearly understanding the decisions made around data collection and data interpretation was a crucial step, perhaps one that would give us some pause before rushing to grand conclusions about whole societies. Now, I confess, such a strident call was catalyzed by a genuine embarrassment on my part about how quickly the findings of one of my articles became out of date, and my dismay at the paradox of an algorithmic analysis being technically correct, and yet often yielding different, sometimes contradictory results when the underlying database was added to. In the decade that followed, having parked my research in Australian literary studies, then book history, then digital humanities, and now library information management, I might say a professional nomadism typical for members of the Australian humanities diaspora that has followed a saga of funding cuts, workforce rationalisation and intellectual predation, I wonder how similarly about the profound technological changes that are impacting our sectors now. Are we indeed vulnerable to making similar mistakes in the GLAM sector? I say this because the vocabulary of obligatory optimism in AI, which adds to the magical thinking already entangled with computational activities, and by this, just ask any developer who's experienced working for a manager who does not know the difference between Excel and XML. This vocabulary often obscures questions around blind spots in knowledge. If knowledge is divided between technicians and scholars, clients and vendors, how do we really understand the benefits and disbenefits provided by an AI model? How do we avoid the regressive identity politics of, in the case of digital humanities, I guess, scholar versus technician, where the critical understanding of an AI's impact is clearly separated out from the expert technical support that often underpins computational development, research, and analysis? Now, I recognize these questions carry too much baggage to unpack in my remaining minutes, but it is an integral element to why AI4LAM encourages discussion and knowledge transfer around how AI, in all its various guises, might shape clients' information practices and expectations in cultural heritage contexts. For example, what does human-centered labor in the GLAM sector look like in the wider move from counting and visualization to modeling and algorithmic intermediation? Now, by intermediation, I mean those moments when we are using systems where future decisions, our decisions, are guided towards those decisions preferred by the model. Now, we've seen the impact of this recently in the form of content bubbles, silos of information often structured through recommendation and news aggregation engines that can lead to the mass computational production of ignorance of one area or another. Indeed, is it too much of a stretch to draw a long arc between the issues we've seen emerge around content bubbles and the issues that might emerge from an unequal distribution of knowledge of what an AI model is doing, and indeed the production and exploitation of ignorance that can exist in between? In another context, just the other day, we were talking about an advertisement we saw for an AI-powered $400 toothbrush, where you track your habits of teeth cleaning via an app. This follows a broader societal pattern of reordering the production and consumption of information and knowledge, where intellectual habits, those habits central to a people's way of understanding themselves, are intermediated by an AI model instead. Yet these models are often built through analysis of the aggregate data of specific demographic cohorts, tapping into the majority behavior of others not on the payroll, but which influence our own understanding of ourselves. this is leading increasingly, in my view, to a neurotic machine class of society, where everything wants to be your personal assistant, wants to chat, wants priority notification status, wants to know how well it did, an excess of complexity that monetizes our frustration by never quite leaving our side. Now, big stuff, provocations, but this is all to say that we need to work together to remove the artificial barriers placed between different forms of knowledge so that we can better grapple with the affordances and challenges that AI platforms will bring to bear on society. AI4LAM is a growing community dedicated to that challenge and those provocations. And with that, I would now like to introduce the amazing Liz Stokes. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Jason. As I recently shared earlier today, I was talking about the carpentries and library carpentry. I might take it a little step back just to perhaps explain the role of my organisation, the Australian Research Data Commons, and why we might be interested in the AI4LAM group. So our vision for the ARDC is that we see a transformed digital infrastructure which supports leading edge research and innovation. And my position in that, by working for the Skilled Workforce Program, is all of this investment in platforms and services and getting systems to talk to each other all of this investment is wasted if people don't have the skills to be able to engage with that infrastructure. And so my interest in this local chapter, and I guess with the carpentries more broadly, is that the carpentries, as a pretty great volunteer organisation, actively provides roles. Yep, I'm using the visual pun again because I'm all about reuse. Provides roles, and it provides that social infrastructure which makes it easier to learn collaboratively. And I know that from the training that I have provided myself and the training that I help to facilitate, it always works better when you've got different kinds of people in the room, okay? You don't, everyone always I guess, although people love to argue for discipline, specific training materials and resources, that's good and it's great to have them. But also being able to be in a space where people are coming across disciplines and from different institutions, with different roles, it honestly feels so much better when you learn that you share the same problems, or you might approach that problem in a different way that you hadn't considered before. So, for example, with our FAIR Data 101 course that I spoke of earlier, having researchers as well as librarians and people from all kinds of research institutions, whether they were medical research centres or whether they might have been running a repository for a university, our discussions were so much richer because people had different investment in similar from different parts of the same problem. And so I guess and another example of that are the ResBaz festivals that I continue to champion, and I'm looking forward to see how we run these festivals this year because they're likely to be online. These are built on the idea that it is better to learn across disciplines and across roles, and that our learning is better when we're more diverse. I think that almost rounds it up. The last thing I wanted to say is that the AI4LAM, only very recently, I discovered that I have carpentries colleagues across the world who are involved in the AI4LAM chapters, people from the UK and from the US, really really surprisingly, are all involved in different aspects of teaching and learning AI as well. So I'm looking forward to some interesting opportunities to actually deliver some carpentries workshops and instructor training through the AI4LAM group. That's it.
That's it. Cool. Thank you, Liz. Okay, we're nearly there, folks. This is a beautiful view down on the south coast of New South Wales and Yuin country. The inspiration for this was thinking about the Tasman Sea between Australia and New Zealand and how much we actually have in common and how much we're able to work together. And of course, we operate roughly in the same time zones. But the reason we pitched this talk is because we really want this community to feel that that people with different, as Liz and Jason have mentioned, different backgrounds, different domains, different institutions. You may be heavily involved in another group, but you can have a line of communication across into this group so that you can kind of knit those activities together. I think Corey's talk this morning really pointed to something quite profound, and that was about movements occur because little groups of interest actually come together and realize, and he used the example of ecology about people who wanted to protect owls and people who wanted to protect rivers, and that they actually saw benefit in helping each other protect their interests or push forward their interests together. And we are the first chapter to form, and that was in part to do with the fact that it's easier to do practical work together when it builds on existing work or existing relationships. And of course, we've got a long-held working relationship that we maintain between Australia and New Zealand in the cultural heritage sector, and also in digital humanities, and also in technology. So we'd really love any of you who are in the session today to jump in and just join some of our webinars. And if you feel like volunteering, put your hand up. And if you want to talk to anyone, I promise you, this is my last slide. We're the coordinators. We are just the people who stood up and said, yep, I'll take a role in leading, and we'll volunteer. And you can volunteer for a day, you can volunteer for the whole 2 years we've committed to, or just join in and participate and build your own learning. So thanks very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you at some of our sessions and maybe helping us out with some of the things that we do.
Oh, thank you, Ingrid, Jason, and Liz. You know, it's a good thing I'm muted, because throughout that I was like, yes, you know, I agree with so much of this. And I think, Jason, too, you really tapped into some of the structural issues facing GLAM, the humanities, the broader research community. So thank you for that too. Now I'm going to let the three of you jump out into our Q&A session, because I'm sure that there's lots of people wanting to get more information about how they can join. I think you made a really great point about it. It takes people standing up, and it also takes, you know, creating a community. So often, particularly in GLAM, we can feel isolated, or we can see barriers and problems that we want to overcome, or we can see where we want to get to, and it's not necessarily clear how we can get there as an individual. So I think, you know, creating these groups and having these conversations and really creating these communities are incredibly important. So on that note,
thanks very much.
Q&A. Oh, good to see you all. Thanks again. Now, for everyone else, after you've had your Q&A, you'll be coming back at 5:10, where Hugh and I will be doing our Go GLAM wrap-up. I can't believe we're already at the end of the day. It's just gone so quickly. So we'll see you back in 5:10.
Thank you.